He trained 18 legends. Every one of them died. Not in old age, not in bed. They died within 9 days of each other, on the same collapsing front, and he watched almost all of it from a ridge 3 kilometers away with a spyglass in his hand. They died doing exactly what he taught them. He had taught them to fight. He had never taught them to survive. Then he died too, last, alone, holding a broken training token with one thought left. I would do it differently. 200 years earlier, a failing instructor at the worst academy in the kingdom woke up in a rented room the size of a closet with a stranger's face in the mirror. This time, he picked different students. The end of the world doesn't look dramatic when you're standing above it. That's the first thing nobody tells you. From high enough up, an army dying looks like a slow tide going out. There's no music, no swelling drums. There's just movement in a direction that shouldn't be happening, and the awful patience of it, and the fact that you can see the entire thing at once and cannot reach any part of it. He was on the ridge because that's where a commander is supposed to be. He had argued against it. He had lost that argument to men with more medals and less experience, which is how most catastrophes begin if you trace them far enough back. The greatest living instructor of his generation put on a rock with a spyglass, 3 kilometers from everyone he loved. Below him, the line was coming apart. The first of his students to die was the one who could not retreat. He'd been like that since he was 15, a red-haired boy with bandaged hands who treated every backward step as a personal accusation. There was a thing that happened behind his eyes when he was told to fall back, a shutter coming down, and after that you could shout at him all day and he would not hear a word of it. The instructor had loved that about him. That's the part that came back later, over and over, in the years when there was nothing left to do but remember. He had loved it. He called it spirit. He praised it in front of the other students, held it up as an example of what the rest of them should aspire to. And every time he praised it, the boy dug in a little harder the next time, because praise from that man was the only currency the boy had ever cared about in his entire life. So when the eastern flank broke, and the correct answer, the obvious answer, the answer any second-year cadet could have given you in their sleep, was to withdraw 400 meters and reform behind the ridgeline, that boy planted his feet. He held. He was very good at holding. It was the thing he was best at in the world. He was still holding when the ground underneath him stopped existing. The second was the healer. She had never once in her life been able to leave someone bleeding. Not in training exercises, not in field drills, not when it was tactically correct, not when she was directly ordered, not when the person bleeding was wearing an enemy uniform. There was a wall somewhere inside her, and on the other side of that wall was a decision she simply could not make. She went forward into a burning street, past the point where forward stops being a direction you can come back from. She went because there was noise in there, and noise meant people, and people meant she had to. She got 2 of them out, 2 soldiers, both of whom survived the war, and neither of whom ever spoke about that day in public for the rest of their lives. She did not get herself out. The third was the one who wouldn't ask, and this one is the one that broke him, because she could have called. That's the thing that sat in his chest for the rest of his life, and then followed him past the end of it. There were 3 units inside her range. Any one of them would have dropped what they were doing and come at a dead run because of what she had become to them over the years. She was the reason half of those people were still breathing. All she had to do was open a channel and say 4 words. She didn't. She hadn't asked anyone for anything since she was 17 years old. Since the first time she trusted a person with something that mattered, and that person turned around and sold her position to a rival house for an amount of money that wasn't even large. It wasn't a fortune. It was a middling sum, paid quietly, and it cost her the last part of herself that could reach outward. After that, she removed the entire category of asking from her life, the way you'd pull a tooth that hurt, completely, permanently, and without discussing it with anyone. So she went down alone, beneath a thing that 4 people working together would have handled in under a minute, 300 meters from help that would have come running if she had made one single sound. And the instructor stood on that ridge and watched it happen, and understood the exact shape of what he had done. Every one of them had a flaw, every single one, and every one of those flaws he had personally found, sharpened, polished, and handed back to them. Because in a training hall, in a controlled fight, on a scoring sheet, those flaws all look like strengths. Refusing to retreat looks like courage. Refusing to abandon the wounded looks like loyalty. Refusing to ask for help looks like independence. None of those things are courage. They are the same fear wearing different clothes. It took him 18 funerals to understand that, and by then there was nobody left to explain it to. When the sky broke, and it did break, that isn't a figure of speech, there was a crack in it, and light came through that was the wrong color entirely, a color that hurt to look at directly. He was already on his knees. Not from a wound, from the weight of it. He had a token in his fist, the little bronze disc every student receives on their first day at any academy in the kingdom, stamped with the year and the school and nothing else. 18 of those discs had been handed out by that hand. He had made a small ceremony of it every single time because he believed it mattered, and he had been right about that if nothing else. The token snapped. He felt it go, the clean, bright crack of it against his palm. Then the light came down, and then he was somewhere else. He woke up choking, not from a wound, from air. His lungs pulled in a breath his body wasn't braced for, and he came off the mattress hard, hands out, expecting stone underneath him and finding a thin bed frame that creaked in protest. The room was the size of a storage closet, peeling wallpaper, one narrow window with gray light in it, the smell of damp and someone else's sweat that had been living in those walls for years. He sat there breathing for a long time. The face in the mirror was wrong. Younger, first of all, late 30s instead of the 62 he had been carrying around, but the wrong kind of younger. Thin in a way that spoke of skipped meals rather than discipline. Dark hair going gray at the temples about 10 years too early. A thin scar cutting through the left eyebrow that he had not earned and did not remember getting. He knew the face, though. That's what made his hands go cold. He'd seen it exactly once. Decades ago, and also 200 years from now, in a corridor at a small academy he had visited one time for a review he had been ordered to attend and wanted no part of. The man in that mirror had been a joke. Not a cruel man, not a scandal, just absent. An instructor at the bottom-tier academy where the kingdom sent students nobody else would take, and a bad instructor even by that standard. He turned up, he said words, he went home. He collected a wage that barely covered the room the instructor was currently standing in. On the table by the window sat a stack of unpaid bills. He counted them without meaning to. 3 months. And on the wall, a paper calendar with a year printed across the top. He read the year, and the recognition landed in his chest like cold water going down. 204 years before the war. Which meant that everyone who was going to die in that war had not yet been born, with a very small number of exceptions. A handful of people who, at this exact moment, on this exact morning, were children. He sat down on the edge of the bed and did not move for a long time. Let's be honest about the assets. He had a body with no measurable mana capacity, in its late 30s, undertrained and underfed, with a cough already living somewhere at the bottom of the lungs. He had a job he could lose on any given morning. He had a reputation somewhere below the floorboards. No money, no allies, no name that would open a single door anywhere in the kingdom. And he had this. 200 years of combat experience burned so deep into the mind that it had survived being carried across death itself. Every technique he had ever learned, every technique he had ever invented, every mistake he had ever made, cataloged and understood and turned over so many times in the dark that the edges had gone smooth, and a complete, precise, unbearable memory of a future that had not happened yet. He walked to the academy that morning because he genuinely did not know what else to do with his hands. The building was worse than he remembered. Corridors that hadn't seen paint in a generation. Windows with a putty crumbling out of the frames. A brass nameplate beside a door with a stranger's name on it, his name now, mounted crooked, and nobody in that entire building had cared enough about the man behind that door to straighten it in years. That detail told him more about the life he had inherited than the unpaid bills had. The office had dust on the desk thick enough to write in. He found the roster in the second drawer, underneath a stack of forms nobody had ever filed. Third-year remedial group, the class they give to the instructor they don't respect, made up of the students nobody will fight over. 3 names. He read the first one and stopped breathing. He knew it. Everyone in the world he came from knew it. It belonged to a woman who, 22 years from that morning, would burn a city down to its foundation stones and stand in the middle of it while it burned. It took 4 nations working together, setting aside 100 years of mutual grievance to finally bring her down. There are 3 separate holidays in 3 separate countries that exist because of what she did. He was looking at her name on a list of failing students. 15 years old, attending the worst class at the worst academy in the kingdom because nowhere else would take her. He read the second name, a boy who would grow up to hold a line he should have abandoned and die there and be given a statue for it in a square that no longer exists. He read the third, a healer who would walk into a burning street and not come back out. His hand closed on the paper hard enough to crease it down the middle. 15, all 3 of them. Nothing had happened to them yet. The betrayal that hollowed the first one out, that was 6 years away. It hadn't happened. The person who did it to her had not yet even met her. They were, at that moment, some anonymous young man in a merchant family 2 provinces over, going about his day. The war was 2 centuries out, and the other 2 were only in it because of who they became in the decades between now and then, and none of those decades had been lived. None of it was written yet. He stood up from that desk, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, the thing sitting in his chest was not grief. He went to the window. Below him, on a dirt field that needed resurfacing, a group of teenagers was going through the first form badly, without supervision, because nobody had come out to watch them. He stood at that window for a long time, and he thought about the fact that he had been given something almost nobody in the history of the world has ever been given. Not power, not a second chance at greatness, a second chance to be wrong differently. The classroom held 3 students and enough empty chairs for 30. The girl with the crimson eyes sat at the back with her feet up on the desk. Long black hair, loose, not tied back the way regulations required, and clearly not for the first time. She watched him come in with the flat, bored contempt of someone who has already run the calculation and concluded that nothing in this room is going to matter. She was, by an enormous margin, the strongest 15-year-old in that building. Everyone knew it, including her, and it had done exactly nothing for her except make her alone. The red-haired boy sat at the front, hands and forearms wrapped in bandages that were not from combat drills. They were from the wall behind the training hall. He hit that wall when he lost. He lost frequently. Nobody had ever asked him to stop, and nobody had ever asked him why, and both of those facts were in his file with no comment attached. The blonde girl sat as far from both of them as the room physically allowed, in the white and pale blue of a healer's uniform, with the particular stillness of a person trying to occupy as little space in the world as they can manage. 3 children written off by every adult who had ever stood in front of them. He didn't introduce himself. He walked to the desk, dropped a bronze training token onto it, and the sound it made in that quiet room was very loud. "Today," he said, "you're going to lose." The girl at the back laughed at him, out loud. It wasn't even hostile. It was the honest laugh of someone hearing something genuinely funny for the first time in a while. 20 minutes later, all 3 of them were flat on their backs on the training field, and nobody was laughing. He hadn't used mana. He didn't have any worth the name. That hadn't changed and wasn't going to. What he had was 200 years of knowing precisely where a 15-year-old shifts their weight in the half-second before they commit to a strike. That, it turns out, is enough. It's more than enough. It's almost unfair. The red-haired boy went first, because of course he did. Straight in, hard and honest and completely without deception, and the instructor stepped inside the line of it and put him on the ground in under 2 seconds. The boy got up, did it again. Same opening, same result. Third time, same. The healer wouldn't attack at all at first. She stood at the edge of the circle with her hands at her sides and her weight on her back foot. He waited. He didn't prompt her, didn't encourage her, didn't make it easier. She came eventually, badly, apologizing the entire way in a small voice, and he put her down gently, and she stayed down, looking up at the sky like it had personally betrayed her. And then the girl with the crimson eyes came at him, and she was, genuinely, alarmingly, good. He felt it the instant she moved. That raw ceiling, the thing that would one day terrify 4 nations, already sitting there in the shoulders of a 15-year-old. If she had 5 more years and any structure at all, he would have been in serious trouble. She also went down, because talent with no structure is speed pointed in the wrong direction, and he had been correcting that specific error since before her great-grandparents were born. They lay in the dirt, all 3 of them, furious and humiliated, and beginning to understand that the humiliation was not going to stop. And then he did the thing that none of their previous instructors had ever done. He held out his hand. The red-haired boy stared at it like it was a trap with a mechanism he couldn't see, looked at his face, looked back at the hand, then took it. They went again. They lost again. He offered his hand again, and again, and again, and again, until the sun was going down and all 3 of them were too tired to lift their arms, and the anger had burned off somewhere around the 20th repetition. Because it turns out that you cannot sustain rage that long against someone who keeps helping you back up. That was the entire first lesson. Not a technique, not a stance, not one single correction to their form, which was, frankly, terrible across the board. Losing, getting up, and letting someone else help you do it. Here's why. And this is the thing he could not explain to them, then or ever. Every one of his 18 legends had died alone in a crowd. Not one of them died because they lacked skill. They died in the specific gap that opens between people who have never practiced needing each other. The boy who wouldn't fall back had 2 units behind him. The healer had an entire squad who would have carried her out. The girl had 3 units in range. They all died surrounded by help they had never learned how to take. So he didn't start with sword work. He started with the hand. By the time it was fully dark, the 3 of them were sitting in the dirt in a rough circle, breathing, and he was sitting with them, and nobody had said anything for a while. The girl with the crimson eyes broke it. You're not going to explain what that was about. It wasn't a question. She didn't ask questions. No, he agreed. She looked at him for a long moment with an expression he recognized immediately and hated seeing on someone that young. The careful, guarded calculation of a person working out whether an adult is worth the risk of having expectations about. Then she got up, dusted herself off, and walked away without another word. And she came back the next morning. All 3 of them came back. That was the part he hadn't been certain of, lying awake the night before doing arithmetic in the dark. 3 students, in a class nobody checked attendance for, at an academy where nobody would have said anything if they'd simply stopped. They came back, and that was the first thing that hadn't happened in the old world. Here's the thing about knowing the future. It is not a weapon. Mostly it's a map of every place you already failed, drawn in detail, and handed back to you with the corners neatly squared. So he built each lesson around a death. The red-haired boy needed to learn to retreat, not tactically. The boy understood retreat perfectly well as an abstract concept, could explain it on paper, could identify the correct moment for it while watching someone else. What he could not do was make his own feet perform it, because somewhere early in his life he had learned that a step backward and being worthless were the same event. So the instructor made retreating the entire curriculum. Drills where the only pass condition was giving ground, sparring where any forward step was an instant loss, exercises where the boy had to cross the whole field backward under pressure, and the pressure did not stop, and there was no version of the exercise where planting his feet worked. The boy hated it with a purity that was almost admirable. He argued, he sulked, he accused the instructor twice of trying to make him a coward on purpose, which was, in a limited sense, accurate. He walked off the field entirely on 2 separate occasions, and both times came back within the hour, which told the instructor everything he needed to know about the boy and never needed to say out loud. And then, one ordinary afternoon, mid-exchange, with nobody having said anything, he gave ground. 3 clean steps back, resetting his stance, blade still up, eyes still forward. Then he blinked, visibly, like a man who had just caught himself speaking a language he never learned. The instructor said nothing at all. You don't announce a thing like that. You let it belong to them or it isn't theirs. The healer needed to learn to touch a wound, which sounds absurd for a girl wearing a healer's uniform. It wasn't. She could mend a fractured bone from across a room. Her theory scores were the highest in her year, and it was not close. She was, on paper, the most gifted student in that building after the girl with the crimson eyes. What she could not do was put her hands on someone who was actively bleeding in front of her. Because the first time she ever tried, at 11 years old, on someone she loved very much, it hadn't worked. And she had been holding on when it stopped mattering. He didn't lecture her about it. He had tried lecturing people about things like this for 200 years, and it had never once worked on anybody. He took out a knife and cut his own hand. A shallow, unimpressive line across the palm, enough to bleed properly, not enough to matter. And he held it out, and he waited. She stood there for a very long time, long enough that blood ran off the edge of his hand and started dotting the floorboards between them. He kept waiting. He was extremely good at waiting. He had 2 centuries of practice and absolutely nowhere else to be. She put her fingers on the cut. Her whole arm was shaking hard enough that he could feel it through his own hand. She held on anyway. The wound closed. Clean, fast. Better work than anything in her file suggested. And she made a small sound that was not quite crying and not quite anything else. He wrapped his hand, said, "Again tomorrow," and left the room before she could see his face. He did it again the next day. And the day after that. 11 days in a row, the same shallow cut on the same palm, until the day she took his hand and turned it over without being asked and got to work while still complaining about the weather. And then there was the girl with the crimson eyes, and hers was the hard one, because she had to learn to ask for help. That was the flaw. That was the whole thing. That was what turned a brilliant, isolated 15-year-old into something 4 nations had to combine forces to put down. She trusted exactly once, at 17, and it was sold. Afterward, she removed asking from her life and kept removing, year after year, decade after decade, until there was nothing left inside her but capability and distance. You cannot teach a person to ask by telling them to ask. Telling her would have guaranteed she never did it again as long as she lived, out of pure spite, and she had enough spite to run on for a century. So he gave her tasks that were impossible alone. Not difficult. Impossible. Weights one person cannot physically shift. Formations one caster cannot hold open. Exercises built around a hard mathematical requirement of 2 sets of hands, designed specifically so that no amount of talent or stubbornness could close the gap. She failed the first one in silence and wouldn't look at anyone for the rest of the day. She failed the second one and put her fist through a training dummy afterward, which the instructor quietly repaired that night and never mentioned to anyone. She failed the third and then stood alone in the middle of the field for a full minute with her hands shaking at her sides while the light went orange around her. He watched from the edge and did not intervene, and it was one of the hardest things he had ever done, because he knew precisely what waited at the end of that road if she never learned this. And on the 4th attempt, without a word, without turning her head, without any change of expression at all, she held one hand out sideways toward the red-haired boy. He took it immediately, like he'd been waiting weeks for it, which he had. They finished the exercise in 11 seconds. She stood there afterwards staring at her own hand with an expression the instructor would remember for the rest of that life. Complete, undefended confusion. As though the hand had acted on its own authority and she could not work out what it had just done to her. That evening, alone in his office with one candle, he took out a list he had written on his first day. 3 names, beside each one, in small letters, the thing that killed them. He drew a single line through the first entry, then he sat in the dark for a while and did not feel triumphant. Because he was also doing the other arithmetic. The one about what happens to 200 years of downstream events when you reach in at the root and change 3 lives. He had just started breaking the future on purpose. He had no idea yet how much of it was going to break. An academy is a machine for producing a specific kind of person, and machines do not enjoy being reconfigured by a man in a coat with frayed cuffs. The complaints started small, the way they always do. His methods were unorthodox, his students weren't drilling the standard forms in the standard order. He had been observed on the training field losing to 15-year-olds, repeatedly, deliberately, which somehow made it worse rather than better in the retelling. Then the results started arriving, and that was the actual problem. His 3 remedial students beat a second-year group in a scheduled exercise. Not a fluke, the report said so specifically, in a tone of considerable irritation. 2 weeks later they beat another one, and they didn't do it spectacularly. That was the part the instructors couldn't process. There was no display of overwhelming power, no prodigy moment, nothing you could point at in a report and circle. They simply kept doing the correct thing at the correct moment, while their opponents kept doing the impressive thing slightly too early. Which is, if you think about it for more than a second, considerably more alarming. That's when the silver-haired girl walked into his office. Shoulder-length silver hair, cold, pale blue eyes, black uniform with gold insignia at the collar, top student of the academy by every measure they had, heir to a military house old enough that several of the kingdom's borders were, in a fairly direct sense, their fault. 17 years old, carrying herself with the absolute composure of a person who has never once been embarrassed in public and has no framework for imagining what that would even be like. She wanted a demonstration match, her class against his, 6 against 3. She did not phrase it as a challenge. She phrased it as a courtesy, a quiet way of ending an embarrassment before the instructors' council ended it loudly, at his expense, in front of everyone. And the worst part, the part that told him exactly who she was and exactly what her own flaw would eventually cost her, is that she meant it completely sincerely. In her mind, she was being kind. He accepted before she finished the sentence. The arena was full. An academy is a machine for producing a specific kind of person, and machines do not enjoy being reconfigured by a man in a coat with frayed cuffs. The complaints started small, the way they always do. His methods were unorthodox. His students weren't drilling the standard forms in the standard order. He had been observed on the training field losing to 15-year-olds, repeatedly, deliberately, which somehow made it worse rather than better in the retelling. Then the results started arriving, and that was the actual problem. His 3 remedial students beat a second-year group in a scheduled exercise. Not a fluke, the report said so specifically, in a tone of considerable irritation. 2 weeks later they beat another one, and they didn't do it spectacularly. That was the part the instructors couldn't process. There was no display of overwhelming power, no prodigy moment, nothing you could point at in a report and circle. They simply kept doing the correct thing at the correct moment, while their opponents kept doing the impressive thing slightly too early. Which is, if you think about it for more than a second, considerably more alarming. That's when the silver-haired girl walked into his office. Shoulder-length silver hair, cold pale blue eyes, black uniform with gold insignia at the collar. Top student of the academy by every measure they had. Heir to a military house old enough that several of the kingdom's borders were, in a fairly direct sense, their fault. 17 years old, carrying herself with the absolute composure of a person who has never once been embarrassed in public and has no framework for imagining what that would even be like. She wanted a demonstration match, her class against his, 6 against 3. She did not phrase it as a challenge. She phrased it as a courtesy, a quiet way of ending an embarrassment before the instructors' council ended it loudly, at his expense, in front of everyone. And the worst part, the part that told him exactly who she was and exactly what her own flaw would eventually cost her, is that she meant it completely sincerely. In her mind, she was being kind. He accepted before she finished the sentence. The arena was full. That surprised him. He had underestimated how badly the academy wanted to watch this. The stands were packed with students who had spent an entire term hearing rumors about the strange remedial class, and every instructor in the building had found a reason to be there, and they had all come for the same thing. His 3 students stood in the middle of all that noise, 15 years old, looking very, very small. He watched from the upper gallery with both hands on the stone rail so nobody could see them. The signal sounded. The first opponent came in hard and fast at the red-haired boy, a big second year with reach and confidence, opening with exactly the kind of committed, aggressive charge that would have ended this in 3 seconds 6 months earlier. The boy would have met it head-on. He'd have lost badly and hit a wall about it afterward. He gave ground. 3 clean steps back in that tight arc, blade up. The opponent, committed to a collision that had just stopped existing, stumbled through empty air with all his weight in front of him. And the girl with the crimson eyes was already in the gap. Because they had drilled that specific gap 400 times. Because retreat is not retreat when someone else is standing exactly where the enemy is about to be. 6 became 5, and the noise in the stands changed pitch. The healer held a barrier a 15-year-old had no business holding. Not a spectacular one. A wide, low, unglamorous shield that wasn't there to win anything, only to buy 2 seconds at a time and then 2 more. Her hands were steady, her eyes were open. There was a boy bleeding 3 meters away from her, and she was not frozen. She was working. And underneath all of it, quietly, she was talking. A low, steady stream of nonsense that nobody in the stands could hear, and that the person on the ground in front of her could. 5 became 4, then 3. And then the silver-haired girl stepped forward herself, and the arena went quiet in the way an arena goes quiet when 600 people all realize the same thing at the same moment. She put all 3 of them on the ground with one technique. It wasn't close, it wasn't dramatic. There was a flash, and a sound like a very heavy door slamming somewhere much larger than the building you're standing in, and then there were 3 15-year-olds lying in the sand and a great deal of dust in the air. Up in the stands, people began standing up to leave. The girl with the crimson eyes got up. Nobody had told her to. There was no signal, no shouted instruction. Nothing left to prove and nothing to be gained. She got up with one arm hanging wrong and blood at her mouth, and she looked across that arena at the strongest student in the academy for about a second and a half. And then she turned and held her hand out to the boy on the ground beside her. 600 people watched her do it. He took it. He got up. Then the 2 of them turned together and pulled the healer up off the sand, and the 3 of them stood in a rough line in the middle of that arena, and nobody in the stands sat back down. What happened in the next 9 seconds is still argued about by people who were there. They didn't win. Let's be honest about that, because the story doesn't need the lie. 3 battered 15-year-olds did not defeat the strongest student in the academy. But the boy gave ground in that tight, aggressive arc and drew the follow-up exactly where he wanted it, and did not flinch when it came. And the healer's barrier came up half a second before it was needed instead of half a second after, because she had stopped bracing herself first. And the girl with the crimson eyes went into a gap that existed only because 2 other people had made it for her, and she went into it without hesitating, which 6 months ago she could not have done, because 6 months ago she would not have believed the gap would still be there when she arrived. When the dust settled, the silver-haired girl was on one knee. Her uniform was intact. She wasn't seriously hurt. She was back on her feet within seconds, and the match was called in her favor, correctly and without argument from anyone. And the arena was completely silent. Because every person in that building had just watched the top student of the academy forced onto one knee by 3 remedial 15-year-olds. And more importantly, they had all seen how. There was nothing there to copy. No secret technique, no hidden bloodline, no revelation. 3 children had simply refused to fight alone. Up in the instructor's gallery, a man in a worn coat with frayed cuffs stood watching with his hands shaking on the rail, and it had nothing at all to do with pride. He had just watched the girl who burns a city hold her hand out to someone. In public. In front of 600 witnesses. On her own initiative, with nobody telling her to and nothing to gain from it. That was the moment he knew the old future was gone. And that should have been the happiest moment of 2 lifetimes. It was not, entirely, because a man who has spent 200 years studying consequences cannot watch a fixed point come loose without immediately wondering what else is attached to it. She came to his office 4 days after the arena. Not immediately. That was the first thing that told him something about her. A person who wants an explanation comes the next morning, while the humiliation is still hot. A person who wants to understand takes 4 days, and arrives having already thought about it more than anyone else has. She knocked. That was the second thing. Nobody in that building knocked on his door. Shoulder-length silver hair, black uniform, gold at the collar, standing in a doorway of an office with dust in the corners, and a stack of graded exercise sheets on a chair, because there was nowhere else to put them. "I won," she said. "You did," he agreed. The match was called in my favor, correctly. It was. She stood there for a moment, and he watched her arrive at the thing she had come to say, and find that she could not quite get it out, which was, he suspected, an entirely new experience for her. He decided to help. "You want to know why it doesn't feel like it," he said. She didn't answer, which was an answer. He moved the exercise sheets off the chair. She didn't sit down. But she came into the room, which was the same thing. 600 people watched you put 3 15-year-olds on the ground with one technique, he said. By any measure that exists at this academy, you were flawless. And every single person who left that arena was talking about them. Yes. Do you know why? Because it was novel. Flat. Rehearsed. She had clearly built that answer over 4 days and was not satisfied with it, which is why she was standing in his office. No, he said. It's because you fought a battle and they fought together. Those are not the same activity, and everybody in that building could see it, including you. She looked at him for a long moment. You're going to tell me I need friends, she said. There was a specific contempt in it, the contempt of someone who has been handed that particular platitude by well-meaning adults since she was 6 years old. No, he said. I'm going to tell you something worse. He leaned back. You've never needed anyone, not once. Not in your entire life. Everything that has ever been asked of you, you have been able to do alone, and you've been trained since childhood to treat that as the highest possible achievement, which means you've never developed the thing those 3 children built in 4 months, which is the absolute certainty that when you move into a gap, someone will be holding it open when you get there. He watched that land. It landed slowly. It landed the way things land on people who are used to understanding everything immediately. That girl, he said, went into a space that only existed because 2 other people made it for her, and she went in without checking. Not without looking, without checking. Do you understand the difference? Yes. Very quiet. Then you understand what you don't have. She was silent for a while. Outside, somewhere, an instructor was shouting a count for a drill. That's not a weakness, she said at last. Being able to do it alone is not a weakness. It isn't, he agreed. It's the most useful thing in the world, right up until the day it isn't, and on that day it kills you. And the terrible part is that you'll never see that day coming, because everything before it will have proven you right. Something moved across her face then. Not agreement, recognition of a different kind. The kind you get when a stranger describes a thing you have privately worried about at 3 a.m. and never said aloud to anyone. He had, of course, been describing a specific death. Hers. Which he had watched from a ridge, 200 years and 1 lifetime from that room, in the 9th day of a war that had not been declared yet. She had gone down alone, too. Late in the collapse, holding a position that 4 people could have held comfortably, refusing to fall back to a line where there was support. Not out of pride at the end, out of habit. She had simply never learned that the other option existed. He did not say any of that. Teach me, she said, and that was the moment he understood what he was actually dealing with. Not arrogance, not entitlement. A 17-year-old who had just discovered a gap in herself and moved to close it inside 4 days, which is faster than almost any adult he had ever trained. No, he said. Her jaw tightened. Why? Because you don't need a teacher. There is nothing I can show you about technique that you can't find yourself inside a month. You're better than I am, in the only way that matters here, and both of us know it. Then what do I need? He was quiet for a moment, because the honest answer was going to cost her something, and because he had spent 200 years learning that this is exactly when you say it. You need to lose, he said, properly, to someone you can't dismiss, repeatedly, in front of people, until it stops meaning what you currently think it means. That's not a lesson, that's just failure. It's the only lesson there is. Everything else is decoration. She stared at him. You made them lose, she said slowly. On purpose. That's what you were doing on that field. That's what the whole first month was. Yes. That's why they got up. A pause. That's why they got up together. Yes. She stood in the middle of that dusty office and did the arithmetic, and he watched her do it, and he could see the exact moment she understood that the demonstration match she had arranged as a kindness had been, from his side, a final examination, and that his 3 students had passed it in front of 600 witnesses. She turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. "You're not what you look like," she said. It wasn't a question. "A man who could see that in a 15-year-old doesn't end up here." He said nothing at all. She looked at him for one more second, cold, pale eyes doing something he didn't like, which was thinking carefully, and then she left, and the door clicked shut behind her. He sat in the quiet for a long time afterward. Because he had come back into this world with a very specific plan, and that plan had involved being invisible, and he had just been looked at properly by the most dangerous 17-year-old on the island, and because of what she'd asked for. In the world he came from, she died alone at the end of a war that took everyone. In this one, she had walked into a stranger's office 4 days after her first public defeat and asked to be taught. He had wanted to change 3 lives. The number was going up. That night, he coughed blood into a handkerchief in a dark office. He looked at it for a while, then folded the cloth carefully, put it in his coat pocket, and went back to marking exercise sheets, because there was nothing else useful to do with the information, and the sheets still needed marking. The body he was living in had never been strong. That much had been obvious from the first morning. What he had been doing since then was driving it, every day, at an output it was never built to produce. Not raw power. He didn't have any. Something worse. The constant, grinding technical precision of 200 years of experience run through the muscle and bone of an underfed academic in his late 30s. Every drill he demonstrated instead of describing. Every spar he took himself instead of handing to an assistant he didn't have. Every night alone on the field after the students went in. It was wearing out. He could feel exactly how fast and roughly how much was left, because knowing precisely what a body has remaining is one of the things 2 centuries teaches you, whether you want to learn it or not. He taught the next morning as though nothing had happened. The girl with the crimson eyes noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. That was half of what made her dangerous. She watched him through an entire lesson with her jaw set, and she said nothing, and he pretended not to see her noticing. That silence became a third presence in the room that neither of them ever acknowledged out loud. At night, alone on the field, he ran his own forms until he collapsed. And lying there on his hands and knees in the dirt at 2 in the morning, staring up at a sky with no crack in it, he finally understood the thing he had been walking around for the better part of a year. He had assumed his mistake was tactical. Wrong lessons, wrong emphasis, praise given to the wrong instincts at the wrong ages, a correctable error, of the kind you fix by paying closer attention the second time through. It wasn't that. His 18 legends had all fought the same way. You can see it if you look at the old records, and he had, obsessively, for years, in the part of his life that came after the funerals and before the war. 18 different people. Different builds, different temperaments, different weapons, different backgrounds, recruited across 2 decades from opposite ends of the kingdom. All of them moving like the same man. Because that is what he had built. He had not trained 18 fighters. He had made 18 copies of himself and then sent them into a war that killed him. They didn't die because they were weak. They died because they were him, and he was mortal. And 18 copies of one mortal man is just one man dying 18 times over 9 days. He lay on that field for a long time. The next day he watched his 3 students train, and for once he watched them properly. Not for errors, for differences. The red-haired boy retreated, but not the way the instructor retreated. The boy gave ground in a tight, aggressive arc that kept his blade forward and the pressure on. Something the instructor had never taught and never would have invented, because it did not suit his own build at all. It suited the boy's perfectly. The healer had stopped bracing before she touched a wound. She had developed a habit of talking while she worked, steady, quiet, mostly nonsense about the weather or what she'd eaten that morning, and it was calming the person she was treating, and it was also calming her, and nobody had taught her that either. She had found it herself, in the gap he left when he stopped instructing and started waiting. And the girl with the crimson eyes asked for help out loud, not with a gesture, not with a look, with words in a complete sentence in front of other people, and then she went straight back to work as though it had cost her nothing, which it very obviously had and always would. 3 students, 3 completely different fighters, not one of them fighting like him. He turned away so they wouldn't see his face. That evening he sat alone in the empty classroom with 3 bronze training tokens laid out in a row on the desk in the orange light from the windows. Then he took the broken one out of his coat, the one that had come with him across 200 years and 1 death, still snapped clean through the middle, and set it down beside the others. 4 tokens. 3 whole, 1 broken. He sat there until it was completely dark, and then he sat there a while longer. She waited until the other 2 had gone. That was deliberate. He knew it was deliberate the moment she didn't leave with them, because in 4 months he had never once seen that girl do anything by accident. The classroom was going orange at the edges. 3 bronze tokens sat on the desk in a row where he had left them, and a 4th beside them, snapped clean through the middle. She looked at the broken one for slightly too long. Then she said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to not lie to me." "That's a large request." "You can refuse to answer. I prefer that to a lie." He put his pen down. "Ask." She didn't sit. She stood at the end of the desk with her arms at her sides, and when she spoke, it was in the flat, careful voice of someone who has rehearsed a thing and is determined to get through it without stopping. "Every drill you gave him was about retreating," she said. "Not footwork, not distance. Retreating, specifically, for 2 months, until he hated you. And it was the exact thing he needed, and none of the other instructors had ever noticed it in 4 years. He wasn't subtle about it. Let me finish." Sharp, he shut up. "Every task you gave her involved touching someone who was bleeding. Not healing, touching. And you cut your own hand to do it, 11 days in a row, when you could have used a training dummy or a volunteer or literally anything else." She paused. "And every single thing you have ever asked me to do requires a second person." The light went another degree oranger. "Not most things," she said. "Everything. 4 months. I checked. I went back through everything you've assigned me since the first week, and there is not one exercise on that list that a single person could complete alone. Not one. That's not a teaching style. That's a design." He didn't answer. "So here's the question." She looked straight at him. "You didn't diagnose us. You didn't watch us and work it out. You knew before you walked into that room. Day 1, before you'd seen any of us fight." She let that sit. How? He had known this conversation was coming for approximately 3 months. He had run through perhaps 40 versions of it in his head, in the dark, on the training field at 2 in the morning, and every single version had ended in the same place, which is why he had never bothered choosing one. There was no answer he could give her, not because she wouldn't believe it. That was the strange part. He was reasonably sure she would believe it, eventually, because she was the kind of person who followed evidence wherever it went, regardless of how uncomfortable the destination was. The problem was what believing it would do to her, because the moment she knew there was a written future, she would ask what was written for her, and she would keep asking, and she would not stop because she never stopped, and he would eventually have to look a 16-year-old in the face and tell her that in the version of the world he came from, she burned a city down and 4 nations combined to put her in the ground. You cannot tell a person that, not because it's cruel, because it's load-bearing. Tell someone what they're going to become and you hand them a script. Some of them fight it. Most of them, eventually, quietly, start reading their lines. He had spent 200 years watching people become what they were told they were. "I can't answer that," he said. "Can't or won't?" "Both. Genuinely both, and I'd tell you which one if that helped, and it wouldn't." She absorbed that. He watched her run it, the tilt of her head, the small stillness, that terrifying processing speed working through the possibilities and eliminating them one at a time. "You're not lying," she said eventually. "No." "You're also not going to tell me." "No." "Ever?" "I don't know." That, at least, was completely true, and he thought she heard it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something he hadn't predicted at all, which was rare enough by that point to be genuinely disorienting. She sat down. Across the desk from him, in the chair with the exercise sheets on it, which she moved to the floor without comment, and she looked at the 4 tokens. 3 whole and 1 broken, she said. Yes. The broken one's yours. Yes. You didn't get it here. He said nothing. She nodded slowly, as if a hypothesis had just been quietly confirmed and filed away without ceremony. All right, she said. All right? I'm not going to ask again. She stood up. Not because I've stopped wanting to know, because you've never once asked me for anything, and this is the first time you've refused me something, and I can work out what that means without being told. She went to the door, then, without turning around, whatever it is you're doing, it's costing you something. You think we haven't noticed. We've all noticed. He noticed before I did, actually, which should tell you how badly you're hiding it. His hand, resting on the desk, did not move at all. When you decide to tell us, she said, we'll be here. And she left. He sat alone in that classroom until the orange went out of the windows entirely, with 4 bronze tokens on the desk in front of him and a cough sitting at the bottom of his lungs like a stone. 200 years ago he had trained 18 people who would have died for him without ever once asking what he was carrying. This one had asked in the 4th month. He put the broken token back in his coat pocket, and he thought, for the first time since he had woken up in a rented room with a stranger's face in the mirror, that he might have made a serious miscalculation about how much time he had left to finish this. A year later, she beat him. Not with power. She had more raw power than him from the first day they met. That was never the test, and both of them knew it. She beat him tactically, on the training field, in front of the other 2, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. He pressed her. She gave ground, 3 clean steps, that tight aggressive arc, the retreat she had learned from a red-haired boy who learned it from being forced to do the thing he hated most in the world. He followed. Following was correct. The pressure was working, the angle was good, she was giving up ground faster than she should have been. It was a trap. She had built it 4 exchanges earlier and let him walk into it using his own momentum as the mechanism. He hit the ground on one knee, and the point of a training blade stopped a hand's width from his throat. And then, for the first time in 200 years, he laughed. Out loud, in the dirt, with a 16-year-old standing over him and the other 2 staring like the color of the sky had changed. She held her hand out to him. He looked at it for a second longer than he needed to, at a hand extended freely, without being asked, by the girl who in another future never asked anyone for anything and never offered anything either, and who stood alone in the middle of a city she had burned while 4 nations gathered to kill her. He took it. And that was the exact moment the sky darkened. Not weather. Everyone on that field felt the difference immediately, in their teeth and in the small bones of the ear. The light went wrong in the specific way light goes wrong when something very large is being done to the world somewhere else. He turned around slowly, still holding her hand, and he already knew what he was going to see. He had seen it once before, from a ridge above a dying city at the end of a life. There was a crack in the sky. It was small. It was thin. It was 203 years too early. He stood there and did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic was very simple and very bad. He had changed 3 lives at the root. Those 3 lives touched dozens of others. Classmates who trained differently because of what they saw in that arena, instructors who changed their methods, a top student who lost in public for the first time and had to build a new understanding of herself out of the wreckage. Every intervention had been propagating outward for 2 years, and somewhere in that cascade, something that was supposed to stay sealed for 2 more centuries had noticed that the shape of the world no longer matched the shape it had been promised. He had bought his students a future. He had also moved the war into it. Behind him, 3 16-year-olds were staring up at a broken sky, and none of them understood yet what they were looking at. And in about 4 seconds, one of them was going to turn and ask him. He stepped in front of them, old habit, completely useless habit, given what he was and what was coming through that crack, and he did it anyway, because 200 years had not managed to train it out of him, and neither had dying. His hand closed around the broken token in his pocket, and then something happened that he had not planned, had not taught, and could not have predicted. The girl with the crimson eyes stepped up beside him, not behind, beside, and when he glanced sideways at her, she was not looking at him for instructions. She was looking at the crack in the sky, and she was calculating. He could see her doing it, he had taught her how, and she was not afraid. A moment later, the red-haired boy moved up on his other side, blade already drawn, feet set in a stance that could give ground the instant it needed to. And the healer took the position behind all three of them, where she could see everyone at once and reach any of them in 2 steps. Which is exactly where she should have been, and which nobody had ever told her. 200 years ago, he had built 18 copies of himself and sent them out to die. This time, he had built something else. He was about to find out whether it was enough. He knows that in 4 hours, the fire reaches the outer districts. He knows that in 6 days, the northern front collapses. He knows the names of every person who dies because of what this woman becomes. He trained 18 of them himself. Every single one of them is already dead. So he closes his eyes on the hillside, and the world takes him back again. He wakes up on a cot in a room the size of a storage closet, with rain coming through a crack in the ceiling. The ceiling is wooden. The building is wooden. Half the building is rotten. This is Ashfall Academy, and it is the worst combat academy in the kingdom. It has held that title for 19 consecutive years, and everyone involved has stopped pretending otherwise. He sits up slowly. His hands are the same. The scar is the same. The coat hanging on the door is the same coat. He is 200 years before the war, in the body he had when he was still nobody, in the year the whole thing starts. And this time he knows every single thing that is going to happen. If you want to see how this ends, subscribe. The bell rings outside. Somewhere down the corridor, a student is swearing at a broken locker. He puts on the coat. The training yard at Ashfall is a rectangle of packed dirt behind the main hall, and the equipment on it is older than most of the students. 3 of them are waiting for him. The academy calls this the remedial class. The students call it the discard pile. It is where Ashfall puts the cadets it has already decided are not worth teaching, so that they stop wasting the good instructor's time. 3 cadets, 1 instructor nobody else wanted. He looks at them for a long moment because he has not seen any of them alive in a very long time. The first is a boy with short red hair and yellow eyes, and both his forearms are wrapped in dirty bandages he changed himself this morning. He is 15. He has lost every single sparring match he has ever fought at this academy. He has never once been knocked out. That is the problem. He simply refuses to fall, so his opponents keep hitting him until an instructor stops it, and then he gets up, bows, and asks to go again. The academy wrote him off as stupid. In 11 years, he holds a bridge alone against a column of 2,000 so that a retreat can finish crossing. He does not fall back. Nobody asks him to fall back. He dies exactly the way he has been dying in that training yard since he was 15, and the instructor is the one who told him it was a virtue. The second is a girl with pale hair tied high, green eyes, and a healer's white and blue uniform that does not fit her properly. She is the highest scoring healing student in her year on paper. She cannot touch an open wound. Not will not, cannot. Her hands lock up and her breathing goes wrong, and she has been failed out of every practical examination 3 times running. The academy wrote her off as weak. In 9 years, she is the last field medic left standing on a collapsing line, and she works for 11 hours straight without stopping. And then she keeps working after her own hands have stopped being reliable, because nobody told her she was allowed to stop. The third is standing slightly apart from the other 2. Long, straight black hair, sharp, cold features, junior uniform with dark red trim, worn correctly, buttoned to the throat. Her eyes are crimson. She is 15 years old, and she is the top-ranked student in the entire remedial year, which means nothing, because she has been placed here for what the file calls an inability to function within a unit. She does not ask for help. She has never asked for help. When she is paired with another cadet, she works around them as though they are furniture. The academy wrote her off as arrogant. In 12 years, she stands in the middle of a burning capital with her hands at her sides. The instructor looks at the 3 of them standing in the rain on the packed dirt. Every version of the future he has lived through starts right here, in this yard, with these 3 children, and with a man who taught them that strength means never bending. He is going to teach them the opposite. The Academy makes the announcement that afternoon. The Inter-Academy trial is being held at Ashfall this year, for the first time in 2 decades. 3 other academies are sending delegations. The Royal Military Observers are coming. Sponsors are coming. For a school that has finished last for 19 years, this is not an honor, it is an inspection. The headmaster stands in the Great Hall and explains, in the careful voice of a man reading his own obituary, that every class will compete. Every class, including the remedial one. The hall laughs. It is not cruel laughter, particularly. It is the laughter of people who have simply never considered the discard pile as a thing that participates. In the second row, a girl with silver hair and cold blue-gray eyes does not laugh. She is 17, black uniform, gold insignia, first in every ranking Ashfall keeps. She is the only student this academy has produced in 19 years that anyone outside it has heard of, and she has never lost a match, and she has never in her life required another person's assistance to finish anything. The instructor watches her from the back of the hall. He knows what she becomes, too. She is the first of the 18 to die. That evening he takes his 3 students back out to the yard, in the dark, and tells them what they are going to do at the trial. He tells them they are going to lose. Not lose as in fail, lose as in choose it. He is going to teach each of them to walk into the moment where they break, on purpose, in front of 4 academies and the Royal Observers, and go down. The red-haired boy asks him to repeat it. He repeats it. The boy tells him that he has never quit a match in his life. He says it with pride, the way he has been taught to say it. The instructor tells him that is precisely why he is going to be dead before he is 30. The healer asks him, quietly, what the point of it is. He tells her the truth, or as much of it as she can carry. He tells her that everyone she is about to train beside is going to spend the next 10 years learning to be unbreakable, and that unbreakable things do not bend, they shatter, and that he has watched it happen to better people than any of them. He tells her that the strongest person he ever taught died alone because asking for help had never once been modeled to her as something a strong person does. He does not say the name. The girl with crimson eyes is standing 4 meters away with her arms folded, and she has not said a word. She speaks at the end. She asks him what makes him qualified to teach anyone anything, given that he is a remedial instructor at the worst academy in the kingdom. It is a fair question. It is delivered like a knife. He tells her that she is right, and that she should not trust him, and that she should watch what happens at the trial and decide for herself. Then he tells her one more thing. He tells her that in about 11 days, she is going to be in a position where she has to ask another person for help, and that when it happens, she is going to refuse, and that he is going to let her refuse, because she will not believe him until she has felt what it costs. She stares at him. He walks back inside and leaves the 3 of them standing in the dark. The remedial class does not fall apart that night, but it comes close. The red-haired boy does not sleep. He sits on the edge of his bunk in the dark until the bell, turning the same sentence over in his head, and by morning he has decided that the man is either mad or testing them, and that either way the answer is the same. He is not going to lose on purpose. Not in front of 4 academies. Not in front of anyone. He tells the instructor this at first light, standing in the yard with his fists closed. The instructor says, "Good." Then he tells him to get in the ring. What follows is the strangest training anyone at Ashfall has ever watched. The instructor does not teach him to strike. He does not teach him footwork or guard or distance. He teaches him to fall. He puts the boy in the ring and knocks him down, and before the boy can get back up, he tells him to stay there. 10 seconds. Then 20. Then a full minute, face in the dirt, while the instructor stands over him doing nothing at all. The boy shakes the whole time, not from pain, from the effort of not standing. Every instinct he has is screaming that a man on the ground is a man who has given up, and he has spent 15 years building his entire idea of himself on the opposite of that. On the 4th attempt, he gets up early, and the instructor knocks him down again. They do this for 3 hours. By the second day, the other classes have started coming to watch. They lean on the fence around the training yard and laugh, because from the outside, this looks exactly like what everybody already believed. The discard pile being beaten into the mud by the one instructor nobody else wanted. The boy hears them. His face goes red and he starts trying to get up faster. The instructor knocks him down harder. On the 5th day, something changes. The boy goes down and he stays down without shaking. He lies in the dirt and breathes and waits, and when the instructor tells him to get up, he gets up cleanly, without any of the frantic pride that used to be in it. The instructor asks him what is different. The boy says he does not know. He says it stopped feeling like dying. The instructor tells him that is the whole lesson, and that most people never learn it, and that the ones who never learn it are the ones you find still standing in the same spot when the fighting is over. The healer is a different problem entirely. Her file says she cannot touch an open wound. The file is accurate but useless because it stops there, and nobody at the academy has ever been curious enough to ask why. The instructor asks. She tells him eventually, standing at the edge of the yard where the others cannot hear. When she was 9 years old, her older brother was brought back from a border patrol with a wound in his side, and she was the only person in the house, and she had exactly enough training to know what she was supposed to do. She froze. She stood in the doorway for 4 minutes. He did not die. That is the part she never says out loud. He lived, and he never blamed her, and she has spent 6 years unable to look at torn skin without her hands locking up. The instructor listens to all of it without interrupting. Then he takes out a knife and opens a cut across the back of his own hand. She tells him to stop. She tells him this is insane. She backs away 3 steps. He holds his hand out and tells her that he is not going to bleed to death from a cut like this, that nothing depends on her getting it right, that she can fail as many times as she wants, and the only consequence is that he will have to bandage it himself. She stands there for a long time. The first time she cannot do it. The second time she gets within a hand's width and stops. The third time she touches it. The healing light is weak and it goes out almost immediately, and the cut barely closes, and she starts crying with fury at how small it is. The instructor tells her it does not matter how small it was. He tells her the point was never the wound. The point was that she reached out while somebody was watching and did it badly, and nothing bad happened. The girl with crimson eyes does not train with them at all. She comes to the yard because attendance is compulsory. She stands at the edge with her arms folded and watches the red-haired boy get knocked into the mud, and she does not participate, and she does not comment. When the instructor calls her into the ring, she says no. She says it flatly, without insolence, the way you decline food you do not want. He does not force her. He does not threaten her with the disciplinary board. He simply says that the offer stands and goes back to the others. This continues for 6 days. What the instructor does not tell anyone is that he already knows exactly where she goes at night. She trains alone in the equipment store behind the east wing from 11 until the small hours, on a dirt floor with a single lamp. She is not lazy and she is not weak. She is better than every cadet in her year, and it is not close. She has simply worked out, somewhere very early, that a person who needs nobody can never be let down by anybody, and she has built the entire architecture of herself on top of that one load-bearing idea. The instructor stands outside the store one night and listens to her working, and does not go in, because he has met her before. He has met her at 27, in a burning capital, standing very still, and he knows exactly what happens to a person who spends 12 years being right about that. On the 7th day, Silver comes to the training yard. She does not lean on the fence with the others. She walks in through the gate, in a black uniform with gold insignia, and she waits with perfect patience until the instructor finishes what he is doing. Then she asks him a question. She asks whether it is true that he is teaching the remedial class to lose deliberately at the trial. He says yes. She asks him whether he understands that the observers are coming, that sponsorships are decided at the trial, that the futures of every cadet in the school are decided at the trial, and that a class throwing matches on purpose will end all 3 of those children before they have started. He says yes to that as well. Then she asks the real question, which is why. And the instructor, who has spent 6 days being careful with everyone, tells this 17-year-old girl the truth without decorating it. He tells her that he used to teach a different kind of student, 18 of them, the strongest anyone had seen in a generation. He tells her that he taught every one of them that the highest virtue was to hold the line, to never ask for relief, to never accept a hand. He tells her that all 18 of them are going to die, and that every single one of them will die alone, holding something they were never asked to hold. He tells her he knows exactly how this happens because he is the reason it happens. Silver stands there and looks at him. She tells him in a very level voice that this is the most elaborate excuse for failure she has ever heard, and that a man who cannot win teaching children that winning does not matter is the oldest story at any academy in the world. She is not being cruel. She genuinely believes it. He tells her she is right to think so, and that he is not asking her to believe him. Then he says one more thing, quietly, as she is turning to go. He tells her that when it gets bad, she is going to send everyone else back and hold the position herself, and that she will do it because she thinks she is the only one strong enough to be trusted with it. He tells her that she is going to be the first of them. She does not answer that. She walks out of the yard and does not look back. The trial opens 4 days later. 3 academies arrive in the morning. Their delegations come up the road in columns, in clean uniforms, with instructors who walk like men who have never once had to explain a losing record. The arena has been repaired for the first time in a decade. The banners are new. The observer's box is full of royal uniforms and men with money. Ashfall has spent 19 years being the joke of this event and has decided that this year, hosting it, they will at least be a well-presented one. The draw is read out at midday. The remedial class draws Valemore Academy in the opening round. Valemore has won the trial 11 times. Their opening round team is 3 second years who have not lost a competitive match between them in 2 seasons. The hall makes a noise when it is read out. Not laughter this time, something closer to embarrassment. The instructor does not react at all because he already knew. In the preparation room under the arena, the 3 of them wait. The healer is gray. The girl with crimson eyes is checking her equipment with total indifference. The red-haired boy is sitting very still with his bandaged forearms on his knees. The instructor kneels down in front of him and says one sentence. He tells him, when it comes, go down and stay down and let them count. The boy says nothing for a moment. Then he says, and if I can't? And the instructor tells him the truth. He says, then I will have failed you exactly the way I failed the last one. The bell goes above them. The red-haired boy stands up and walks out into the light. The opening match of the inter-academy trial lasts 9 minutes and 40 seconds, and by the end of it, nobody in the arena is laughing at Ashfall's remedial class anymore. Not because they win. The Valemore cadet who walks out to meet the red-haired boy is a second year named Nothing That Matters, because in 11 years he will be a district quartermaster with 3 children and he will never fight anyone again. Right now he is 16, half a head taller, and he has been trained by an academy that has won this tournament 11 times. He is polite about it. He bows properly. He does not showboat. He simply expects the match to be over in under a minute because everyone in the building expects that, including the officials. The bell goes, and the boy from the discard pile does not do what the discard pile is supposed to do. He does not rush in swinging. He does not freeze. He steps off the line, takes the first exchange on his forearms, and moves. The bandages on those forearms are not decoration. He has been taking hits on them for 2 years, because nobody ever taught him to avoid anything, and the accidental result is that he has developed the most punishing guard of any 15-year-old in the kingdom. The Valemore cadet hits it 4 times in a row, and something in his expression changes. The crowd notices around the 90-second mark. It starts as confusion, a murmur running along the lower tiers. The remedial class is not supposed to still be standing at 90 seconds, and the boy is not merely standing, he is making a trained second-year work. At 2 minutes he lands his first clean strike, and the noise the arena makes is genuinely surprised. In the observer's box, one of the royal officers leans forward slightly and asks somebody a question. In the preparation tunnel, the instructor watches all of this with his arms folded and does not move. Beside him, the healer has both hands pressed over her mouth. Behind them, the girl with crimson eyes is watching the sand with an expression that is no longer indifferent, though she would not admit that to anyone. The instructor has seen this match before. He has seen this exact sequence, in a different arena, with a different boy who is now a name carved into a memorial nobody visits. He knows what happens at 4 minutes. He knows what happens at 6. He knows precisely when the moment arrives, and he knows that he has spent 11 days preparing a 15-year-old to walk into that moment and lie down. At 3 minutes and 10 seconds, everything the boy has been doing stops working. The Valemore cadet is not a genius. But he is properly trained, and properly trained fighters solve problems. He stops attacking the guard. He starts attacking around it, low, at the legs, over and over, with no interest in finishing quickly anymore. The first knockdown comes at 340. It is clean. It is decisive. It is exactly the kind of knockdown where a sensible corner throws in a towel and everyone agrees the boy did far better than anyone expected. The boy gets up. The second knockdown comes 40 seconds later, and it is worse. He gets up from that one too, more slowly, and the sound that comes out of the crowd is no longer excitement. In the tunnel, the healer says the instructor's title out loud, once, as a question. He does not answer her, because this is the moment. This is the entire 11 days. This is the specific second where a boy who has been drilled 100 times into the dirt is supposed to stay in the dirt and let the official count him out, and walk away from a competitive loss with his legs still working. The boy looks over at the tunnel. For a fraction of a second, he looks straight at the man who taught him to fall, and the instructor sees him decide. He sees it happen in real time, the way he has seen it happen 18 times before, and there is nothing on the earth he can do to stop it, because the one thing you cannot do is fight for somebody else. The boy turns back and raises his hands. What happens over the next 5 minutes is difficult to watch, and the arena watches all of it. He is not outclassed after the fourth knockdown. He is being dismantled. The Valemore cadet is no longer trying to win because he won 3 minutes ago, and there is a particular kind of horror in a 16-year-old's face when he realizes the person in front of him will not stop, and the officials are not stopping it either. He asks. He actually asks. He steps back at the sixth knockdown and says something to the referee, and the referee looks at the corner. The Ashfall corner is one instructor in a coat. Every rule of the trial permits him to end it with a raised hand. He raises his hand. The boy sees it and shakes his head, and blood goes across the sand from the movement, and he says the word "no" loudly enough that the front 8 rows hear it. Under trial rules, a competitor may refuse his corner's withdrawal once. It is an old rule. It exists because the academies who wrote it believed that a fighter's will is sacred, and that a boy who wants to keep standing has earned the right to keep standing, and that this is a virtue worth protecting in writing. The instructor helped write that rule. In the version of the world he came from, 300 years from now, that clause is still in the book, and it has killed more cadets than any weapon in the arena. So he lowers his hand and lets it happen, because the alternative is a lie, and the boy has to feel this. It ends at 9 minutes and 40 seconds when the referee stops it against both corners' wishes. The boy is still on his feet at the moment the match is called. That is the part that matters to him. That is the only part he will remember for the next 2 days. He never went down and stayed down. He has never been counted out in his life, and he still has not been. They carry him out on a stretcher anyway. The arena does something strange as he goes. They applaud. Not politely. 2,000 people, 4 academies, royal observers, standing and applauding a 15-year-old from the worst class in the worst school in the kingdom, because he refused to fall, and because that is the single most admired quality in the entire culture that built this tournament. The instructor stands in the tunnel and listens to 2,000 people teach the exact lesson he has spent 11 days trying to unteach. It takes them 9 seconds. The medical wing under the arena is white and cold and smells of antiseptic. The boy has 3 cracked ribs, a broken left hand, a fractured cheekbone, and a concussion that will keep him out of the rest of the tournament. The academy physician is angry in the flat, tired way of a man who has said the same sentence too many times. The healer will not leave. She sits by the cot with her hands in her lap, and she does not freeze, not once, not at the blood or the swelling or the sound the boy makes when they set the hand. She notices this about herself much later. The girl with crimson eyes stands in the doorway for a long time and then leaves without saying anything. She goes to the equipment store. She does not train. She sits on a crate in the dark with the lamp unlit and thinks about a boy taking 6 knockdowns in front of 2,000 people who applauded him for it, and about a man raising his hand and being told no. She does not reach a conclusion, but something has moved slightly, and she is aware of it, and she resents it. Late that night, the instructor comes to the medical wing. The boy is awake. His face is wrapped on one side. He is looking at the ceiling. The instructor sits down, and neither of them says anything for a while. Then the boy speaks, and he is not defiant about it. He says it quietly, almost apologetically, in the voice of someone explaining a thing he assumes is obvious. He says, "I couldn't. Everyone was watching. If I went down there, they'd have all seen me go down." He says, "I know you told me to. I just couldn't be the one who quit." The instructor does not answer, because he has heard that sentence before, word for word, in the same order, from a man 23 years older than this boy, standing at the wrong end of a bridge with 2,000 soldiers coming up the road, refusing an order to withdraw. That man had a wife. He had a daughter who was 6. He said, "I just can't be the one who quits." And the instructor, who was his commander and had trained him from the age of 15, had felt proud when he said it. He sits in the white room and looks at a bandaged child who has just said a dead man's last words back to him without knowing it, and understands something he has managed to avoid understanding through 4 lifetimes of trying to fix this. He did not fail them at the end. He failed them at the beginning, in a training yard, with a sentence he thought was a compliment, and by the time any of them reached a bridge or a pass or a burning city, the failure was 11 years old and load-bearing. He is not here to change how they die. He is here to change what they were taught to be proud of, and he has 11 days of it against 15 years of everything else, and today, 2,000 people undid all of it in 9 seconds by clapping. The boy falls asleep. The instructor stays in the chair until the lamps burn out. The second day of the trial begins with an empty chair. The red-haired boy is out. 3 cracked ribs and a concussion remove a competitor automatically, and the academy physician signs the form before breakfast without asking anyone's opinion about it, which leaves 2. Under trial rules, a class may continue with a reduced roster at a scoring penalty. Nobody has ever done it because nobody has ever been desperate enough, and because the penalty is designed to make continuing pointless. The instructor signs the continuation form anyway. The official at the desk asks him twice whether he understands what he is signing. He says he does. The second round is the team round. 2 competitors from each class, 1 arena, 1 match, and a support rule that exists because the trial was originally designed to test units rather than individuals. A class may field 1 combat cadet and 1 support cadet, and the support cadet may not strike, only sustain. Ashfall's remedial class fields a girl in a healer's uniform who has failed every practical examination she has ever sat, and a girl with crimson eyes who has never in her life accepted assistance from another human being. The draw pairs them against Corin Hall, which is not Valemore but is not nothing either. The healer is sick before they go out. She stands in the preparation room under the arena with her hands flat against the stone wall and breathes the way she has been taught to breathe, and it does not work, and she tells the instructor she cannot do this. He does not tell her she can. He tells her that she is probably right, that she will probably freeze, and that if she freezes, he will end the match himself and nobody will die. Then he tells her the only thing that actually matters. He says, "You are not out there to be good at it. You are out there to be in the room when it happens." She looks at him like he has said something in a foreign language. Behind her, the girl with crimson eyes is checking the straps on her guards and pretending not to listen. The match starts badly and then gets worse. Corin Hall's combat cadet is fast, technical, and completely unbothered, and within 90 seconds it is obvious that the girl with crimson eyes is not going to be able to hold the center alone. She is good. She is very good. She is 15, and she is holding her own against a 3rd year, and under any other circumstances the arena would be talking about her all week. But the support rule exists for a reason. A combat cadet without sustain burns out, and everyone in the tiers can see her burning. Twice the healer's position lights up on the marker, meaning she is in range and permitted to act. Twice, nothing happens. In the tiers, people start to notice. It is not cruel. It is worse than cruel. It is the particular embarrassed silence of 2,000 people watching a child stand completely still in a marked circle, while the person she is supposed to be helping gets slowly taken apart 9 meters away. The healer knows exactly what she looks like. She knows what the marker means. She knows the range. She has memorized every rule of the support role because memorizing things is the only part of this she has ever been able to do. Her hands are locked at her sides, and her breathing has gone wrong, and she is 9 years old in a doorway again. At 4 minutes, the girl with crimson eyes goes down. It is a clean strike and a legal one, taken across the shoulder and the upper arm, and she is on the sand with the arm not working and blood coming through the sleeve, and the official's count starts. Under the rules, a downed combat cadet may be sustained. That is the entire point of the support role. The marker on the healer's circle goes bright. She does not move. And then the girl with crimson eyes does something she has never done in her life. She turns her head from the sand, with one arm useless under her, and she looks at the healer. And she says a word. It is not a long word. It is not a speech. Everybody in the front tiers hears it, and nobody more than 20 meters away hears anything at all, and there is no recording of it, and the healer will remember the exact sound of it for the rest of her life. She says, "Please." The instructor, standing in the tunnel, closes his eyes for a second, because he told her 11 days ago that this was coming, and that she would refuse, and he was wrong. He was wrong by 4 days and 1 broken arm, and he has never in 4 lifetimes been so glad to be wrong about anything. The healer crosses 9 meters of sand. She does not remember doing it. She goes down on her knees beside a girl who has never asked her for anything, and there is an open wound on that arm, torn and bleeding, and exactly the thing that has locked her hands since she was 9 years old. Her hands lock. She looks at them. They are shaking. And the girl with the crimson eyes, lying in the sand with a broken arm in front of 2,000 people, does not tell her to hurry, and does not tell her she is useless, and does not look away. She just waits. That is all. She waits, and she keeps her eyes on the healer's face, and she does not make it worse. The healer puts her hands on the wound. The light that comes out of her is not impressive. It is thin and unsteady, and it goes out twice, and a qualified field medic would call it a poor job, and the arm is not fixed, only closed enough to stop the bleeding and dull the worst of it. The officials record it as a successful sustain, which under trial scoring is worth almost nothing. The two of them lose the match 40 seconds later. Corin Hall advances. Ashfall's remedial class is eliminated from the second round with the lowest score recorded in the modern history of the trial. Nobody applauds this time. The arena has no idea what it just watched. The instructor knows exactly what it watched. He watched a girl who could not touch a wound, and a girl who could not ask for help, in public, on the record, at a cost, with nothing to gain from either of them. Both of those things are supposed to be impossible. He has the evidence of 4 lifetimes that both of those things are impossible. He stands in the tunnel and finds that he cannot entirely trust his own face. The final of the trial is held that evening, and Silver wins it. Of course she does. She goes through 3 opponents in under 12 minutes, and she does it without a support cadet, having formally declined the option in writing, which is permitted and almost never done. She stands in the center of the arena at the end with the royal observers on their feet, and there is not a mark on her, and she is entirely alone in the middle of 2,000 people cheering. The instructor watches her from the tunnel. She is 17. In 8 years, she is going to send an entire column back through a mountain pass and hold the entrance by herself so they can get clear. And she is going to do it because by then nobody will have ever shown her a version of strength that includes another person's hand. She looks over at him once, from the sand, across the whole arena. Neither of them says anything. Late that night, the girl with crimson eyes is in the equipment store with her arms strapped across her chest. She is not training. She cannot train. She is sitting on a crate in the dark, and she is furious, and she does not entirely know what she is furious about. She said please. In front of 2,000 people, on the record, to a girl who had failed every examination she had ever taken. And the arm still does not work, and they lost anyway, and the whole thing was for nothing. Except that it was not nothing. And the fact that she cannot make herself believe it was nothing is precisely what she is furious about. The instructor does not come. He said he would let her refuse, and she did not refuse, and now he is deliberately staying away, because the one thing he cannot do is stand over this and explain it to her. She has to get there on her own, or it does not hold. So he sits in his own room instead, with the rain coming through the crack in the ceiling, and he lets a 15-year-old girl sit alone in the dark and work out what just happened to her. It is the hardest thing he does all week. The trial ends on a Sunday, and the reckoning starts on the Monday. Ashfall Academy is finished last again, which is not news. What is news is the manner of it. The lowest recorded score in the modern history of the tournament, achieved by a two-person roster that a member of staff signed into the second round on purpose, in writing, after being asked twice whether he understood what he was doing. 3 academies went home with sponsorships. Ashfall went to bed with a number that will be printed in the register for the next 50 years. The remedial class is summoned at 9 in the morning. The instructor goes alone. The headmaster's office has a long table in it, and this morning there are 7 people at the table, which is 6 more than usual. 2 royal observers in dark formal uniform, a representative of the trial board, 3 members of Ashfall's own faculty who have wanted the remedial program closed for 4 years and have finally been handed the argument. The headmaster sits at the end looking like a man attending his own disciplinary hearing, which, in a sense, he is. The instructor stands. The charge, when it is finally spoken aloud, is not misconduct. It is worse than misconduct. It is negligence. A competitor left the arena on a stretcher after refusing a withdrawal his corner had raised. Another was carried out with an arm that will take 2 months to come right. Neither of those things is against the rules, but both of them happened under the supervision of a man who, by his own instruction, had told at least one of them to lose deliberately. The trial board representative says the word deliberately 3 times in 4 sentences, and each time it lands harder. He asks the instructor whether he denies it. The instructor says no. One of the faculty members asks the question everyone in the room has been waiting for. He asks what a man could possibly be thinking, teaching cadets to lose, and the instructor tells them. He tells them, in a plain voice, in front of 2 royal officers, that combat academies across the kingdom have spent 2 centuries selecting for a single trait and calling it courage, that the trait is an inability to stop, that they test for it, reward it, write it into their rule books, and carve it onto their memorial walls. He tells them that the cadets who have this trait most strongly are the ones who get promoted fastest, given the hardest posts, and killed first. He tells them he has watched it happen to 18 of the best fighters this kingdom will ever produce. Somebody at the table asks him what he means by will. He does not answer that. The hearing lasts 90 minutes and produces a compromise, because hearings usually do. The remedial class is not disbanded, because disbanding it in the same month the trial was hosted here would look like an admission. It is placed under review. The instructor keeps his post under formal observation, which means any further incident ends him. The trial board representative makes a note in his register that Ashfall Academy has been formally cautioned. One of the royal observers says nothing at all during the entire proceeding. He watches the instructor's face for 90 minutes with an expression of mild, patient interest, and he writes exactly 1 line in a small book, and he does not share what it says. That man's name is going to matter a great deal later. The red-haired boy is discharged from the medical wing on the Wednesday, and he is not grateful about it. He has spent 4 days with nothing to do except reconstruct the match in his head, and somewhere around the 2nd day, the reconstruction turned on him. Because he did the thing. He stayed up. He did not quit. He did the exact thing he has believed about himself since he was 11 years old, in front of 2,000 people. And he was applauded for it. And his class was eliminated, and the girl he trains beside broke an arm carrying a match he was supposed to be in, and the man who taught him is standing in front of an observation panel because of what he did. He does not know what to do with any of that, so he does what people that age do, and he gets angry at the nearest available target. He finds the instructor in the training yard on the Wednesday evening and asks him why he did not just order him down. He says, "You're the instructor. You could have stopped it. You had the authority. You raised your hand and then you put it down. Why did you put it down?" The instructor tells him the truth, which is that a corner's withdrawal can be refused once under trial rules, and that he was refused. The boy says that is not what he asked, and he is right, so the instructor gives him the real answer. He says, "Because if I had forced you down, you would have spent the next 10 years believing that the only reason you ever stopped was that somebody stronger made you. And the day nobody is there to make you, you'd have gone all the way." He says, "I need you to be able to do it yourself. Not because I told you, because you decided." The boy stands there with his hand in a splint and does not say anything for a long time. Then he asks whether he failed, and the instructor says, "Not yet." The healer is a different case, and the difference is that nobody has told her yet what she did. She has assumed, since Sunday, that she failed. She froze in a marked circle in front of 2,000 people for nearly 4 minutes. She has run that loop continuously for 3 days. Nobody at the academy has corrected her, because from the outside there is nothing to correct. The record says, support cadet failed to act, class eliminated, lowest score in tournament history. It is the girl with crimson eyes who eventually says something, and she does it in the least gracious way available to her. She corners the healer in a corridor on the Thursday, arms still strapped, and says, "You crossed 9 meters." The healer starts to apologize. The girl with crimson eyes cuts her off and says, "I've watched you not cross a room for a wound on someone's finger. You crossed 9 meters with 2,000 people watching. Stop talking about the 4 minutes." Then she walks off, because that is the absolute maximum she is currently capable of, and both of them know it. The healer stands in the corridor for a while afterwards. Silver comes back on the Friday. She does not come to the training yard this time. She finds him in the empty Great Hall in the evening, where he is stacking benches because the remedial class has also inherited the hall duties. She stands in the doorway for a moment before she speaks, which is unlike her. Then she asks him about the girl with crimson eyes. Specifically, she asks whether he told her to do it, whether the please was instructed, staged, part of the same doctrine he tried to sell in the training yard. He says no. He says he told her the opposite. He told her she would refuse. Silver says, "Then why did she do it?" And he says, "Because she wanted to live more than she wanted to be right about herself." Which is rarer than you think, and which is why she is going to be more dangerous than you. Silver does not like that answer. She tells him she has been thinking about what he said in the yard, about the pass and the column and holding the entrance alone. She tells him it is nonsense, obviously. A man cannot know a thing like that. But she says it the way people say things they have repeated to themselves several times without success. Then she asks him something she has clearly not planned to ask. She asks, "If I did that, if I sent them back and stayed, would that be wrong?" And the instructor puts the bench down and gives her the only honest answer he has. He says, "It wouldn't be wrong. It would be the bravest thing anyone in this kingdom would do that year. They'd carve your name into a wall for it." He says, "And every one of those people you sent back would spend the rest of their lives knowing they were only alive because you decided you were the one who was allowed to be spent." He says, "That's what it costs. Nobody ever tells you that part." Silver leaves without responding. She does not come back for 11 days. The girl with crimson eyes comes to him on the Saturday night, and she does not ease into it. She stands in the door of his room with her arms still strapped, and she says, "How did you know?" He asks her what she means, which is a stalling tactic and a poor one. She lists it. She says, "You told me 11 days before the trial that I would be in a position where I had to ask someone for help. Not that I might be, that I would." She says, "You told him to go down at the exact moment he would need to. You knew there was a moment." She says, "You told her she wasn't out there to be good at it. You knew she would freeze. You knew how long. You told her 4 minutes was survivable before it happened." She says, "You signed a continuation form for a 2-person roster before the draw was announced." Then she says, "And you looked at all 3 of us on the first day like you were seeing dead people." The instructor stands in a tiny wooden room with rain coming through the ceiling and understands that he has run out of road. He has done this 4 times. 4 lifetimes, 4 versions of these 11 days. And in every previous one, he was careful and quiet, and he never told anybody anything, and every single time, all 18 of them died anyway. Being careful has a perfect record of failure. The girl in the doorway is 15 years old and has an arm in a strap and has just laid out 5 separate pieces of evidence in the correct order without a single wasted word, and she is not going to accept a lie, and she is not going to go away. She says, "What are you?" And he thinks about the Capitol burning and about a woman standing very still in the middle of it with her hands at her sides. And he decides, for the first time in 4 lifetimes, to answer the question. She is standing in the doorway of a room the size of a storage closet, with her arms strapped across her chest, waiting. He tells her to sit down. She does not sit down. So he stays standing too, and he starts at the part that will lose her fastest, because if she is going to walk out, he would rather she did it now. He tells her he has lived this year 5 times. She does not laugh. She does not move. She looks at him the way she looks at a training dummy she is deciding how to break. He tells her about the war, not the one in the histories, the one that has not happened yet, 200 years from now, that he has watched arrive 5 separate times. He tells her he trained 18 fighters for it, the best anyone had seen in a generation. He names 3 of them because those 3 are already alive somewhere in this kingdom right now, as children. He tells her every single one of the 18 died, not in one battle, across 4 years in 18 different places, each one alone. Then he tells her the part that took him 3 lifetimes to understand. They did not die because they were weak. They died because of the exact quality he selected them for and spent 11 years reinforcing. He taught them to hold, to never fall back, to never ask for relief, to treat the request for help as the beginning of failure. Every one of them did exactly what he taught. That is why they are dead. He is not being poetic about that. It is a straight line. She asks him how she fits into this. She asks it flatly, as though checking a supply list. And he tells her. He tells her that in 12 years she stands in the middle of the Capitol while it burns, with her hands at her sides, and that she is the reason it is burning. He tells her she does not do it out of hatred. She does it because by then, there is nobody left she is willing to owe anything to, and a person like that eventually stops seeing a reason to hold back. The room is very quiet. Then she asks the only question that matters, and it is not the one he expected. She does not ask whether he is lying. She asks why he is telling her instead of simply preventing it. He says he tried that, the 3rd time. He got close enough to a 9-year-old girl with red eyes to do it, and he could not. He tells her he has spent 5 lifetimes trying to change the outcome, and the only thing he has never tried is changing what he taught. She stands in the doorway for a long moment. Then she tells him he is either insane or lying, that both are equally likely, and that she does not intend to spend the rest of the year finding out which. She turns to leave. He tells her one more thing before she reaches the corridor, and he keeps his voice level, because this is the whole point of the conversation. He says, "In 9 days, a supply convoy on the eastern road is going to be attacked at the narrow pass below Ridgemouth." He says, "The escort will be 12 men. 2 of them survive. The academy will be told it was bandits, and it will not be bandits." He says, "It will happen just after midday, and the first thing anyone here will know about it is a rider coming through the north gate at dusk." She does not turn around. She says, "And if nothing happens?" He says, "Then I am insane, you were right, and you never have to listen to me again." Then she is gone, and he sits down on the cot in a room with rain coming through the ceiling, and he starts counting days. She does not tell anyone. That is the first thing that surprises him. He expected her to report it, or use it, or at minimum tell the other 2 that their instructor had lost his mind. She does none of those things. She goes to the training yard the next morning and she works, and she does not look at him once. But she is counting too. He can tell because on the 4th day, she stops going to the equipment store at night and starts sitting where she can see the north gate. The red-haired boy notices something has changed before anyone says a word to him. His hand is out of the splint, and he has been training again for 2 weeks, and he is doing something he has never done before in his life. He is stopping, not quitting, stopping. He works until the point where his form starts to break, and then he sets the weapon down and sits, and gets up 10 minutes later. Nobody taught him to do that. He worked it out lying in a medical cot, listening to a man tell him about a bridge. The healer has changed in a way that is harder to see. She still cannot touch a serious wound without her hands shaking. But she does it now anyway, shaking, and she has stopped apologizing for the shaking. The academy physician noticed. He has started letting her into the treatment room during real cases. Nobody at Ashfall has ever done that with a cadet who failed 3 practicals. She has not said thank you to anyone for this. She is not sure who she would say it to. Silver comes back on the 6th day. She finds him in the training yard at dusk, and she does not open with anything. She just asks whether he was serious about the pass. He asks her how she knows about the pass. She tells him that a 15-year-old with an arm and a strap has been sitting on the north wall for 4 evenings, watching the gate, and that she is not the only person in this academy who notices things. He tells her yes, he was serious. She asks him what he thinks will happen if he is right. It is a better question than it sounds, and he takes it seriously. He tells her that if he is right, 3 cadets and 1 17-year-old are going to have to decide whether to believe a man who has just told them he knows how they die. He tells her that is a much heavier thing to hand a person than a warning. Silver says nothing for a while. Then she asks him what happens to her. He does not answer that. She says, "You told me in the yard. You told me I go first. I want to know when." And he tells her the truth, which is that he does not know anymore. He tells her that every version he has lived through, she died in the 8th year at a mountain pass in the north, and that in every version she got there because of choices she started making at 17. He tells her she has already made a different one, twice, in the last 3 weeks, and that he genuinely does not know what she does now. She asks whether that is supposed to be comforting. He says no. He says it is supposed to be accurate. The 9th day is gray and unremarkable. Nothing happens in the morning, nothing happens at midday. The academy runs its lessons, the kitchens burn a batch of bread, and an instructor confiscates a knife from a 2nd year. By late afternoon, the girl with crimson eyes has come down off the north wall, and there is something in her face that is not quite triumph and not quite disappointment. At dusk, a rider comes through the north gate. He comes in fast enough that 2 cadets have to get out of the road, and his horse is finished, and he does not stop at the stable. Within 20 minutes, the entire academy knows there was an attack on the eastern road at the pass below Ridgemouth, shortly after midday. The rider says the convoy escort was cut apart. He says it was bandits. He says there were survivors. He says there were 9. 9, not 2. The instructor is standing at the back of the crowd in the courtyard when he hears the number, and everybody around him is reacting to the attack, and he is the only person in the kingdom reacting to the number, because he has watched this day 5 times. 2 men walk away from that pass. 2. He knows their names, he knows which one loses an eye, he knows what they say when they get here. 9 men walked away this time. Something moved, and the girl with crimson eyes is standing 6 meters to his left, and she is not looking at the rider at all. She is looking directly at him. 9. He goes back to his room and sits on the cot and works through it the way he has worked through everything for 5 lifetimes, which is backwards, from the number to the cause. 2 men survive that pass. He has watched it 5 times. He knows their names. One of them arrives at the academy 3 days later with a bandaged eye and asks for water. 9 men survived it this time. 7 people who have always died on the Eastern Road are currently alive and walking somewhere in the Eastern Hills, which means something upstream of that pass moved. Something small enough that he did not notice it, and early enough that it had time to spread. He goes through the last 3 months in his head, hour by hour, looking for the thing he did differently. And he finds it, and it is so small it makes him feel sick. In every previous life, the remedial class was quietly disbanded before the trial. There was no continuation form. There was no second-round match with a 2-person roster. This time there was, and a boy from the discard pile took 6 knockdowns in front of 4 academies and refused to fall, and 2,000 people stood up and applauded him. That story left the arena in 4 different directions with 4 different delegations, and it has been repeating itself in barracks and mess halls across the kingdom for 3 weeks. Somewhere in the Eastern Hills, 12 escorts heard a version of it before they rode out. He does not know which of them heard it. He does not know if it made them fight differently, or hold position longer, or simply not run. He knows that 7 men who should be dead are not, and that the only new thing in the world is a story about a boy who would not stay down. He taught that boy to stay down. The boy refused. The refusal saved 7 strangers. He sits in the dark with that for a long time, because it is the first thing in 5 lifetimes that has not gone the way he expected, and he cannot tell yet whether it is good. Crimson comes to him the next morning, and she does not knock. She stands in the doorway and says a single sentence, which is that she watched a rider come through the north gate at dusk on the 9th day and say the word Ridgemouth. Then she says, "You were wrong about the number." He tells her yes. He tells her he was wrong about the number, and that this is the most important thing that has happened in 200 years, and that he does not fully understand it yet. She asks him what changed. He tells her about the trial, about the continuation form, about a boy refusing to go down and 2,000 people learning the wrong lesson from it in 9 seconds. He tells her that the wrong lesson may have kept 7 men alive. She stands there working through it, and he can see the exact moment she reaches the part that matters, because her face changes. She says, "So you do not actually know what happens now?" And he says no. He says that up to 9 days ago he knew everything, and that from 9 days ago onward he knows less than she does, because at least she is not carrying 5 wrong maps. She does not gloat about that. She sits down on the crate by the door, which is the first time she has sat down in his presence, and she asks him to start at the beginning. They talk for 4 hours. He tells her all of it, the 18 names, the order they die in, the 4 years the war lasts, and the 3 it takes before anyone admits it is a war. He tells her the things he has never said out loud, including what he did in the 3rd life when he found a 9-year-old girl with red eyes in a border village and stood behind her for an hour with a knife in his hand. She does not react to that the way a person is supposed to. She just asks why he stopped. He tells her that she was feeding a stray dog. She says nothing for a while after that. Then she asks what he wants from her, and he gives her the only honest answer he has, which is that he does not want anything from her. He wants her to have something he never gave the others. She asks what. He says, someone to owe. 6 days later, a carriage comes up the road with a royal escort, and the academy panics because nobody scheduled a royal anything. The man who gets out is one of the observers from the trial. Middle-aged, plain dark uniform, no decorations at all, and the kind of face that gives nothing away. He is the one who sat through the entire disciplinary hearing without speaking and wrote a single line in a small book. He does not ask to see the headmaster. He asks to see the remedial class. The instructor takes him out to the training yard, and the 3 of them line up in the mud without being told to. The observer looks at them for a while. Then he asks the red-haired boy a question. He asks him why he refused the withdrawal. The boy thinks about it properly before answering, which is new. Then he says he does not have a good reason. He says he thought everyone would see him go down. The observer asks him what he would do now, and the boy says he would go down, and that it took him a broken hand and 4 days in a cot to be able to say that out loud. The observer writes nothing. He turns to the healer and asks her how many practical examinations she has failed. She says 3. She does not add anything to it. She does not apologize. He asks whether she expects to pass the 4th. She says she does not know, and that she has stopped organizing her life around the answer to that question. Then he turns to the girl with crimson eyes and does not ask her anything at all. He looks at her for 4 full seconds and moves on. She notices. She will think about those 4 seconds for a long time. The observer takes the instructor aside at the gate and speaks to him for less than a minute. He says that the report from the Eastern Road reached the capital 2 days ago. He says the escort held a position for 40 minutes longer than a 12-man escort should have been able to hold anything. He says 9 men walked out of that pass, and that 2 of them have already given statements, and that both statements contain the same detail. They both say somebody in the column shouted that they were not going to be the ones who ran. The instructor asks him what he wants, and the observer says, "I want to know what you are teaching down here, because it is not what is written on the curriculum, and it has started showing up 200 kilometers away." Then he gets into the carriage and leaves, and the instructor stands at the gate for a long time. The second piece of news arrives 4 days after that, and it is much worse. The attack on the Eastern Road was not bandits. An investigator sent from the capital found a supply crate at the pass with a military insignia burned into the wood. Not a local one, not a kingdom one. It belongs to a border force from beyond the northern range. A force that, in every single life the instructor has lived, does not cross that range for another 3 years. He reads the report twice in the headmaster's office with his hands flat on the table so nobody can see them. 3 years. The first probing attack always comes in the spring of the year he turns 41. He has built 5 separate plans around that date. It has just happened, and he is 38. The war is arriving early, and he has no idea by how much, because the only thing he knows for certain is that his calendar is now wrong. He walks out of the office, down the corridor, out into the training yard, and stands in the rain until he can think again. Then he does the thing he has avoided doing for 5 lifetimes. He calls all 4 of them together. The 3 from the remedial class, and Silver, who is not his student and does not have to come, and who comes anyway. They meet in the great hall after the last lesson, with the benches stacked and the light going. He tells them everything he told the girl with crimson eyes. The 5 lives, the 18 names, the war. He tells them he has watched every one of them die. Nobody speaks. The red-haired boy has gone very pale. The healer has both hands pressed flat against the bench in front of her. Silver is the only one who looks directly at him the entire time, and her expression does not change once. Then he tells them the part he has been dreading, which is the part he has never had to say before, because until 9 days ago, it was not true. He says, "Everything I have just told you is now unreliable." He says, "Something we did here changed the timing. I do not know how much. I do not know what else moved with it. From this point on, I am guessing the same as you are." He says, "I spent 5 lifetimes being the only person in the room who knew what came next, and it never once saved anybody." Then he says the thing that actually matters, and he says it quietly. He says, "So I am not going to tell you what to do. I am going to teach you how to decide, and then you are going to decide, and I am going to have to live with it." The hall is silent for a moment. Then Silver says, "Good." The border force crosses the northern range 11 days later, and they do not come through the pass anyone was watching. They come through 3 smaller ones at the same time, in the dark, and the first the kingdom knows about it is when the signal towers along the north road stop answering. Ashfall is not a fortress. It is a wooden academy on a hill with a stone wall around a courtyard, 19 years of last place finishes, and 400 cadets between the ages of 11 and 18. It sits directly on the road between the northern range and the eastern grain provinces. The order that arrives from the capital is straightforward and completely useless. Evacuate the youngest, hold the road for as long as is reasonable, and expect relief within 4 days. Nobody who wrote that order has any idea how many are actually coming. The instructor reads it twice, and for the first time in 5 lifetimes, he has genuinely no idea what happens next. There is no memory to check. No version of this exists. He is standing in the same place as everybody else, holding the same piece of paper. He finds it almost unbearable, and then, somewhere under that, he finds something else, which is relief. For 200 years he has been the only person in every room who already knew the ending. Now he does not, and neither does anyone else, and that makes them equals. The headmaster puts the whole academy into the courtyard at dawn and tells them the truth, which is more than the instructor expected of him. He says the youngest 200 leave within the hour. He says everyone else may choose. 41 cadets choose to stay. 4 of them are standing together near the back, and he did not ask any of them to. He tries, once, to send them with the evacuation. He says it badly, because he has never had to say it before, and Silver cuts him off halfway through with a single sentence. She says, "You told us you were going to teach us how to decide, and then you would live with it. That was 9 days ago. You do not get to take it back because you are frightened of the answer." He does not have a reply to that, so he stops trying and starts teaching, and they have 2 days. He does not teach them to fight. They can fight. What he teaches them, in a muddy yard, in the rain, with a war coming down the north road, is the thing he never taught the 18. He teaches them how to leave, how to recognize the moment a position is lost, how to fall back in stages instead of all at once, how to call for someone when your hands are full, how to accept an arm across your shoulders without treating it as a failure of character. It is the strangest thing any of the 41 have ever been taught, and it takes them most of the first day to stop being insulted by it. On the second night, the red-haired boy asks him the question directly. He asks whether any of the 18 would still be alive if somebody had taught them this, and the instructor tells him the truth, which is that he does not know, and that he has stopped pretending the answer matters more than the attempt. The border force reaches the North Road at midday on the third day. It is not an army. It is a probing column, 400 strong, sent to find out what is between the range and the grain provinces. They are professional, unhurried, and entirely unbothered by the sight of a wooden academy with a stone courtyard wall. They have taken 3 border posts in 11 days, and they expect this to take an afternoon. The first hour goes badly for them, and that is the first surprise of the day. 41 cadets and 9 instructors hold the north wall and the gatehouse for over an hour, and they do it because a man who has watched this kind of fight 5 times has told them exactly where to stand, and more importantly, exactly when to stop standing there. Nobody holds a position past the point where it is lost. That is the entire tactic. It looks, from the outside, like an academy that keeps giving ground, and by mid-afternoon the border column has taken the outer wall and the stable yard and lost 40 men doing it. The red-haired boy is on the east stair with 6 others when his position becomes untenable, and he knows it a full 10 seconds before anyone tells him. He can see the angle collapsing. He can see that if they hold another 2 minutes, the stair gets cut, and the 6 of them are finished. He can also see, very clearly, exactly what it will look like to everyone below if he is the one who gives the order to go. He gives it anyway. He is the last one down the stair, and he is not proud about it, and that is the point. He does the thing that would have killed him at 15, and it is the least dramatic moment of his entire life, and all 6 of them live through the afternoon. The instructor is on the courtyard wall when it happens, and he sees the whole thing, and he has to put his hand flat on the stone for a moment. The healer is in the Great Hall, which has been the treatment room since dawn, and she has 31 people in it by mid-afternoon. She freezes twice. Both times it lasts under 4 seconds, and both times she starts moving again, and nobody in the room even notices, because everyone is busy, and she has stopped announcing her own failures. At some point she stops thinking about her hands entirely, which is a thing she has been trying and failing to do since she was 9 years old, and she only realizes it afterwards, standing outside in the dark with her sleeves soaked to the elbow. Nobody dies in that hall. 4 probably should have. The girl with crimson eyes gets cut off from everyone at around 4 in the afternoon in the west corridor, when a section of roof comes down and separates her from the rest of the line. There are 3 of them on her side of it, and 11 of the border column coming through the gap, and she is the best fighter in the building by a wide margin, and for about 90 seconds she genuinely believes she can hold the corridor alone. She is wrong, and the thing that saves her is that she works it out in time. She could have kept going. Every instinct she has ever had is telling her to keep going, that asking is worse than dying, that she has never in her life needed another person to finish something. She turns her head and she shouts for help, loudly, by name, so that the entire West Wing hears her do it. Silver comes through the gap 11 seconds later with 4 others behind her, and the corridor holds, and afterwards nobody mentions it, because nobody thinks it was remarkable. Only 2 people in that building understand what just happened. One of them is standing at the far end of the corridor with a wall between them, and he cannot get to her, and he does not need to. At dusk, the border column pulls back to reform, and the academy has the courtyard, the hall, the gatehouse, and about 6 hours. The line that matters now is the ridge road behind the academy, because that is the way the 200 youngest went, and if the column gets around the hill before dawn, it reaches them on open ground. The ridge is a narrow track between rock and a steep drop. One person with the right footing can hold it against a column for a long time. Everybody in the courtyard works this out at about the same moment, and Silver says, in a perfectly calm voice, that she will take it. She has already thought it through. She is the strongest fighter present. She can hold that track longer than anyone else alive on this hill. Sending 5 people is worse than sending 1, because 5 will die and 1 might hold. It is correct. It is completely correct. Every instructor in that courtyard knows it is correct, and it is exactly the shape of every one of the 18 deaths, and the instructor opens his mouth to argue and finds he has nothing left to argue with. Because he told them he would not tell them what to do, so he says nothing, and he watches a 17-year-old girl pick up her equipment and walk toward a ridge road she is not going to come back from, and he understands that this is the moment he has been failing at for 200 years. Then the girl with crimson eyes steps in front of her. She does not make a speech. She says one sentence, which is, "If you go alone, you die," and I have been told exactly how that goes. Silver tells her that 5 people on that ridge is 5 people lost instead of 1, and that the arithmetic does not care what anybody wants. And the girl with crimson eyes says, "Then do it in rotation. 4 hours each, 3 of us, and nobody is on that track alone at any point in the night." There is a pause in the courtyard while everybody works out that this is not a worse plan. It is in fact a better plan, and the only reason nobody has proposed it is that nobody in the history of this academy has been taught to think of holding a position as something you take turns doing. Silver stands there with her equipment in her hands for a long moment, and the instructor watches her have the argument with herself that 18 people never got the chance to have. Then she says, "Fine, 4 hours. Then you take it. That is the whole thing. That is what he came back 5 times for, and it takes 11 seconds, and nobody in the courtyard understands why the remedial instructor has to turn around and face the wall. The night on the ridge is long and unpleasant, and nothing about it is heroic. 3 of them rotate through it in 4-hour blocks, with 2 others behind each of them. And the border column probes the track twice and pulls back both times, because a track that is always held by fresh people is a different problem from a track held by one exhausted person. At around 3 in the morning, the healer walks the whole ridge in the dark with a lantern, because somebody has to, and she treats 2 people on the track itself with her hand shaking and does not stop once. Relief arrives at 9 the next morning, 5 hours earlier than promised, because the observer with the small leather notebook had been reading the Eastern Road reports for 3 weeks and had already started moving people north before the capital gave the order. The border column withdraws over the range that afternoon without another engagement. Ashfall Academy loses 9 people in 2 days. 9. Not 41, not 400, and not one of the 4 standing in the courtyard when it is over. The instructor sits down on the courtyard steps at midday and does not get up for a long time, because in every previous life, this year did not have a battle in it at all. The war started 3 years later, at a different place, with different people, and by then he had already begun losing them one at a time. He has no idea what happens now. None. The map is gone, the calendar is wrong, the 18 names are still on a wall 200 years from now, and he does not know whether they will be. And for the first time in 5 lifetimes, he finds that he does not want to know. They rebuild the north wall over the following month. The academy finishes last in nothing that year, because the trial is cancelled and nobody minds. The red-haired boy is offered a place at Valemore and turns it down. He stays at Ashfall and starts helping with the first years, and the first thing he teaches them is how to fall. The healer passes her 4th practical examination and then immediately asks to be assigned to field medicine, which is the harder path and the one nobody expected her to want. Silver leaves for the Northern Command in the spring. Before she goes, she comes to the training yard one last time and tells the instructor that she has thought about what he said, about the pass and the column and holding it alone. She tells him she still thinks she could have held that ridge. She tells him she is fairly sure she was right about the arithmetic. Then she says that she is going to take the rotation anyway, every time, for the rest of her life, and that he can decide for himself whether that counts as having convinced her. The girl with crimson eyes stays 4 more years. She becomes the best fighter the Academy has produced in a century, and she is difficult and cold and impossible to work with in exactly the way her file always said she was. But she asks for help now, not often, not gracefully, but she does it, out loud, in front of people, and every single time she does it, the instructor is somewhere in the building, trying not to make it obvious that he noticed. He never tells her what she was. He decides that somewhere in the 2nd year and never revisits it. She finds out anyway, eventually, because she is not stupid, and he was never as careful as he thought. She does not confront him about it. She simply stops asking him about the other lives. He dies at 63, in a bed, in a room at the academy with a repaired ceiling, which is the first time in 5 lifetimes he has managed to reach an ordinary ending. 2 of the 4 are in the room. The other 2 are 200 kilometers away and do not get there in time, and one of them never entirely forgives herself for that, and that is what happens when people are alive. 200 years later, a war comes. It is not the same war. It starts in a different place, for different reasons, and it lasts 11 months instead of 4 years, and the Northern Front does not collapse, because the Northern Front is commanded by people who were taught, 3 generations back, to fall back in stages. There is a memorial wall in the capital with names carved into it, because there is always a memorial wall. It has fewer names than 18. And on a hillside outside the walls, on the night the fighting ends, the capital is not burning. There is a woman standing on that hill looking down at it, long black hair, a dark coat, eyes the color of old blood, and no fire anywhere in the city below. She is not there for any particular reason. She has simply been coming to this hill for years, on this date, and she has never been able to explain to anyone why. She stands there for a while, and then she goes back down into the city, where the lights are still on.